Welcome in. Locked in. Steve Bonham, Vishaal Gupta, Mason Cameron. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
Spectacular.
Good. Better than Tennessee's offense? It's a low
Yeah,
bar.
always. Actually, no, I'm not, Steve. You know what? You brought up some memories. I'm a little upset. I lost a fantasy matchup this week by 0.22. So I'm going to
So
use
you're
my
doing
platform
worse
here.
than Tennessee's offense.
I'm going to use my platform here to speak to the fantasy community. Fantasy community, make kneel downs not count against my totals. Thank you. That's
Sorry,
it.
we can't do that.
That's the end.
That's all right. You beat me last week, so you went 50-50.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That was a good one, though.
That was an awful one. That was one of the worst games fantasy matchups I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on whose shoes you're in, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. All right, let's look at the standings here. Week 16. Mason, you won last week, technically speaking, because you went 2-0, and then Damian Harris didn't play. So
see, what you guys didn't know is
counts.
I knew he wasn't going to play, period.
Oh, yeah, you had the inside information, right? All right, so this guy's holding out on us is what he's saying. Perfect. So Mason continues his dominant stretch through this, and this, of course, being the season finale of Thursday Night Football, is the regular season finale of Locked In. So we will not be here the last 2 weeks of the regular season. We will be back for the playoffs, Jim Mora, to talk about those lines when those games actually happen. But let's get into this week. Let's talk about underdog for one more week this season, and we will start with you, Vishaal. What do you got?
All right, let's start with Zach Ertz, over 44.5 receiving yards. He had a pretty big game last week. He had 6 catches on 11 targets. A lot of that was due to the Cardinals being surprisingly down big against the Lions, so they were in catch-up mode the whole time. But he's still definitely a big part of this offense, especially with Hopkins out for the rest of the regular season. It's kind of him, Christian Kirk, and A.J. Green as their top receiving options. And Ertz is just getting a lot of play, and he's going up against a Colts team that gave up 77 yards to Hunter Henry last week. So this is a really good number, 44.5. Definitely feels like he should go over without much hesitation there. Second, I'll go Derek Carr, under 252.5 passing yards. He's going up against a Denver defense that's only allowed more than 250 passing yards 4 times this year. One of those times was against Derek Carr earlier in the season, but Vegas's offense just has not been nearly as good as they were early in the season. And Waller, he missed practice again today, so there's a good chance he's going to be out for this one. He's just not going to have as many weapons as he did the first matchup. So this feels like way too many yards for Derek Carr, and I'll easily take the under. Denver's defense has been lights out the past few weeks. And then finally, I'm going to take T. Higgins, over 65.5 receiving yards. He's gone over 100 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games, and he had 7+ targets in each of those games. He's going up against the Baltimore secondary, which we've talked about a lot the last few weeks in terms of how banged up they are. They just don't have enough guys out there, at least who we know of. And last week, MVS had 98 yards against them because they were double teaming Devontae Adams all day. So MVS was able to get open. You could do something similar this week with Jamar Chase getting a lot of coverage, leaving T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd open to pick up a bunch of yards. So I'll take over on T. Higgins.
All right, Mason, what do you got this week?
All right, for starters, I'm going to start off with a nice heartfelt plea to all my Hines truthers out there. Go and slam this line this week, Hines truthers. Free Nyheim Hines. So the Colts, they're obviously run by the JT show in Indy. So much so that it's got people kind of, going out on a limb and trying to give him the MVP, which I'm not there, but you know what? If he can keep making this argument, then we'll see. But anyway, back to Nyheim. The Colts have been trying to find a way to use him, and he takes snaps all over the field. He takes snaps in the slot. He takes them out wide, and he takes them on third down. And so that's where we're attacking this receiving line here. So over the last 2 weeks, JT has actually not had a single target, or in the last 2 games, excuse me. He has not had a single target. And that shows that when they look to pass the ball, when they look to get into passing situations, they're looking to take JT off the field to keep him fresh for these running downs where he's really being effective. So far this season, Hines has actually played well in that role. Obviously, he averages about 8.2 per reception. So that means that he only needs 2 to get close to this line. And considering who they play this week at Arizona, I think that that's a reasonable number to hit for a couple of reasons. So for starters, Arizona's had a great season, but they've shown some cracks in a number of areas on their defense. One of them being that they've allowed the 11th most receiving yards to running backs. That's not, a huge amount, but it shows that they definitely have some trouble holding these backs down. They haven't faced many offenses that have targeted them, so they haven't really boosted up in that poor coverage against running backs. They've actually allowed this line though in 15 times in their 14 games this season, and a number of those times a pair of backs hit this line. So reasonably, even if they decided to start throwing to JT again this week, I think that there's enough to go around that they can both fit in under this line or in this line and go over here. 17 yards is really minuscule. Secondly, we're going on to Joe Mixon. So the Bengals have gone through some weird stretch of games this season where they've kind of just lost their footing and haven't been able to figure it out. They currently find themselves in one of those this week offensively, or in recent weeks offensively. They've lost 2 of the last 3. Mixon's had some trouble during that time. He's averaged only 3.2 yards per carry, and he hasn't surpassed 60 yards on the ground during that span. So that's a little troubling. And in the last game, he actually went down with an ankle injury. He is practicing, and he looks good according to reports, but we'll see how the ankle holds up on Sunday. The Baltimore defense is tough, and they really get after you, especially in a matchup like this. I think they're going to be going after, I don't want to say they're dirty, but they might be tugging on that ankle just a little bit to let them know that they're there. Baltimore has had their struggles on defense, though. They're not this solid defense that we always look at them as. But what they're really bad at is kind of defending people through the air. We've actually taken advantage of that a number of times this year on this show. But that doesn't mean they're really great in the run. Teams are just too busy attacking them in the air. They allow actually the 5th most rushing yards, 5th most yards per carry in the league at 4.7. But it doesn't really scare me because when we look at it, they actually allowed the 5th least rushing yards to running backs this year. So teams are just way too busy attacking them through the air. And when you see how their offense can actually produce, it makes sense why teams try to keep pace with Lamar and company and try to put some points on the board. They've actually held backs under this line in 3 of the last 4. Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones all had way under this. I mean, Nick Chubb's not really a receiving back, but Aaron Jones and Kareem Hunt have been known to catch some targets, and they really struggled against this defense. So I like the under here. Let's see. And then Kyler Murray over 288.5 total yards. Although Kyler may not have ripped off the MVP season that we all hope for, he's still a supremely talented player that does things that other humans just can't do. Murray's total yardage line has taken a dip over the course of the season, and that's understandable given his recent stats since returning from injury. He's only surpassed this line once in that 3-game span. That may sound alarming, but I don't really think it's a sign of things to come. Murray hasn't exploded on the ground this year, which has made these lines a bit steeper to get over. But he's actually been really promising in his return since. 2 of his highest rushing totals this season have actually come in the last 3. And I think that if he can continue to push the ball with his legs, it can really help take the pressure off of reaching a line like this with his arm alone. This week versus Indy, so the Colts defense has struggled against passers earlier in the season, but they've done really well to right the ship recently. They've allowed a passer to go over this line just once in the last 4 games, but they really haven't faced anybody quite as athletic as Murray. When you face these passers, it really puts your defense into hard positions. Versus Lamar earlier in the year, the Colts D allowed him over 500 total yards, and the Colts offense has been clicking in recent weeks, like we just talked about with JT, that if the Cards are going to keep pace, there's going to need to be a pretty big game from Kyler, and hopefully some work on the ground is going to be included in there. And after their loss last week, I find it hard to believe that the Cards aren't just going to come out swinging on them and absolutely explode for a bunch of production this week.
All right, fair enough. All right, here's what I got. So I'm going with the double dip on Packers, as much as it pains me as a Chicago native and Bears enthusiast. I'm going with Aaron Rodgers over 260.5 yards. I also had this in our chat last week, and it's the only thing that I actually hit on. Barely got the hook, which is like the first time the hooks worked in my favor all season, so I'll take it. But Rodgers has gone over this number 5 straight games. He's going up against a Browns defense that's coming off a short week and still has most of their starting defense dealing with the COVID protocols right now. So my only concern about this number is that the Packers are winning too big, too quick, and they just stop throwing the ball with Aaron Rodgers in the second half. If it's any kind of a competitive game, he gets to this number relatively easy. But that also plays into the second half of this, which is A.J. Dillon over 46.5 rushing yards. This is the other end. Like I was saying, he has been the primary between the tackles and goal line back all season for Green Bay. He has gone over this number of 46.5 rush yards, 8 of his last 11 games. That may surprise people that have not been paying attention to it. But yes, the RB quote unquote 2 in Green Bay has gone over 46.5 in 8 of his last 11. He hit it for 6 consecutive games before last week when he had just 22 yards rushing against Baltimore. And then finally, Carson Wentz under 210.5. Wentz has only gone over 180 yards passing once in his last 5 games. It has been the Jonathan Taylor show, and I am all here for it. 210 yards is actually the average the Cardinals have given up in that same stretch over their last 5. They gave up 212 to Goff last week in a game that was being very comfortably won by Detroit, but they had no starting running game, essentially. So they basically had to throw the ball to get their production going, even though Craig Reynolds had a pretty good game. And Arizona's defense has not been spectacular, but they've been good enough, and they just do not throw the ball enough with Indy for me to think that Wentz is going to get there. So let's look at these lines here on the board. And again, we talked about it being the season finale. This is going to be the last one in the regular season. So let's have some fun, boys. Okay. let's make this interesting here. So if we can bring this in, there we go. All right. So here's the board with our picks, but this is kind of a breaking news thing, and I'm throwing you guys a curveball. So try to wrap your brain around it fairly quickly here. Earlier, within the hour, I would say it was about half an hour ago, 35, 40 minutes, Underdog made an announcement that they are running a special promotion currently with Josh Allen, whose current total yards over under is 281.5, and they are doing a player boost on Josh Allen. So if you include Josh Allen in a 5-player pick'em, they will up it from the normal 20 times boost to a 50 times. Wow. And you can do a maximum of $10. So we will put in, instead of the usual 5, I will put down $10 on a card, and we will put Josh Allen in it as well. And if we hit it, it's a $500 payout. So let's see what happens here. So first of all, we'll start with that. Josh Allen over under 281.5 total yards. That's where we're starting. And just for this, they're playing New England. In New England, yeah. It's a game that they really need to win if they want to try to win the NFC East or the AFC East and get it away from the Patriots. The Patriots defense has been fairly solid. They haven't had anyone really beat them up in a while. The defense has been really good, but they also haven't had a lot of quality talent. Like in that game that they played a couple weeks ago, remember on the Monday night with all the craziness happening with the weather, you had 145 yards for Josh Allen through the air. Most of his production was kind of on the ground. He had 39 yards rushing in that game. So he was more effective there. He had over 300 yards against Tampa and over 100 yards rushing against Tampa as well. I feel like 281 is a reasonable number. He had 234 last week against Carolina in a game that they dominated. And again, the only reason he didn't reach that is because they were blowing them out. Do we think that Buffalo's going to blow out New England? I don't. I think it's going to be close enough and competitive enough that he's going to have to put up points here. So I'm good taking the over.
Same. I was going to say I would lean the over. And if we go back to that first matchup, as you know, again, like you said, the weather was a big factor.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again.
Yeah, just as a baseline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as a baseline. But even though the numbers didn't look good for Allen, he could have even had a bigger game if some of his receivers just did a better job. I know Knox dropped a couple of big passes, and there's a couple other receivers that just didn't come up for him. So even though the weather was bad, Allen could have had a much better day in that game. So
and that's what I'm saying too. Like he had one, what would that be? Doing quick math in my head here. 184 total yards in a game where the wind was insane, the weather was crazy, and nobody was moving the ball offensively. So when you weren't able to get anything done and he still had almost 200 total yards of offense, I think he's not going to have much of an issue getting this yardage. And then I just go back to last year. I understand different team, different scenarios, but the way that he thoroughly dominated the Patriots in those two games pretty easily, both through the air and on the ground, I feel like he can do it again here. All right, so then we have 4 picks now that we can make here. And I will, if I'm going to put anything from me, I will stand with my Carson Wentz. I know that they should be chasing points theoretically here, but they have been doing it all with Jonathan Taylor on the ground, and I just don't trust Carson Wentz to actually throw the ball effectively to try to keep them in that game. So I would like to add Carson Wentz going under.
Yeah, agreed. I like the pick there because if you even look at a lot of his lines, he's struggling to get even reasonable number of passing yards, let alone, surpassing a 200-yard line, which is, like we've talked about before, is a low line for quarterbacks. But it's rightfully low for him because they do not give a damn about throwing really that much.
Yep. All right, what do you guys want to add to this now?
What are you thinking, V? How are you leaning?
At least for my picks, I think I would lean towards the Derek Carr under. I just don't think that offense is functioning very well right now. They were barely able to move the ball
Denver.
A bad Cleveland team on Monday. Now they're going to, or not a bad Cleveland team, but a decimated Cleveland defense.
Up,
and now you're going up against a Denver defense that's been on fire the last few weeks. I would definitely take that one.
I like it.
And I will actually submit one of mine, but another pick as well in V's pick. I really like the combo, but you guys can maybe push back on me if you dislike it at all. The combo between Kyler and Zach Ertz. I think that's a nice look. They have some chemistry together, and I'm really excited about Kyler because this is one of the lowest lines he's had all season in total yardage. But we're looking at him having some of his best rushing performances recently. It's going to take that stress off of him having to perform. And like we've kind of talked about, I think that this game is going to be fairly competitive, and they're going to have a decent game through the air through both of them. So,
right. Yeah. He only had against Detroit in a game that they were obviously chasing points. He had 4 rushes for just 3 yards, which is very unlike him. But even then, he had 260 total yards in that game. He had 61 rush yards before that, 59 against Chicago. So in what should be a competitive game here, I'm good with that. This was the over on Kyler, right?
Yes.
And then it was also over on Ertz.
Right, and I like that one. But what do you think, V? It's your pick. So I
like that too. I kind of liked all of the overs on the Arizona receiving options because those are really the only receiving options he has right now. Right. So he's going to kind of have to force feed it to AJ Green, Christian Kirk, and Zach Ertz. And Ertz was the lowest among the 3. That's kind of why I wanted that one. It seemed like the easiest one to go over on. It's only 44.5. So I definitely like that one as well.
Right. Extremely reasonable line for sure.
Yeah. It's tough too, because against the Rams, they're really good in the middle of the field. And he still had 5 catches for 42. So now you've got 44.5 against Indy's secondary, their linebackers are still solid up the middle, but yeah, if I feel like the way this has worked out is Ertz has become that over the middle check down option, and you've got Christian Kirk as the guy he's looking for down the field with Hopkins out. So, all right,
Right.
I feel pretty good about all of that. Does anybody want to swap anything else before we lock this in? Because I think this is pretty solid here.
I think it looks good.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Good. All right. So I can't wait for all of it to be 100% wrong. Or, you know what? How this season has gone, we already know what's going to happen. We'll get 4 of the 5, and the 5th one will lose by the hook because that's how.
Or we get everything back in one go, which is exactly how you should approach.
Which is exactly how we drew it up, baby.
That's
exactly
how you gamble. You bet it all to win it back all at once.
Cheers to that.
Always. All right. So there you go. So that's our line officially. Josh Allen with the boost, 281.5 total yards. Carson Wentz, 210.5 passing yards under. Derek Carr under 252.5. Kyler Murray over 288.5 total yards, and Zach Ertz over 44.5 receiving yards. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. Confirm.
My question is, who does Josh Allen know at Underdog?
Right?
I don't know why.
Random game to get a boost on.
I don't know why specifically they went with Josh Allen, because he's the only player out there, but I feel like that's something they're going to try to do more of maybe down the stretch, especially with the limited games coming up.
Right.
Only having the playoff slate available.
That makes
So
sense.
again, if you haven't been playing along with us already and you want to sign up and play, this is a perfect time to do it. Promo code nonsense on Underdog Fantasy. If you, whatever you sign up, whatever you deposit, they will match it up to $100. So if you deposit, $5, they will give you $5. There's your $10. You put that $10 on the line and play along with us, and you could win 500. There you go.
Play along with me. You'll
yeah, specifically play along with Mason.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No, you're good. And again, as always, I will plug out our stuff. Patreon.com/important nonsense. It's where you get all this, guys. Material over here. It's in the Discord. That's the place to be. That's your start sit questions. It gives you all the information that you could possibly need. But most importantly, you get my underdog pick'ems that I've been doing every week. We are still positive in that, in the upper 60%, I believe it is. I haven't looked at it, but we've hit on most of those weeks. We've broken even for the most part to this point. And then these guys with their picks right now, Vishaal, you've slipped a little bit. But you're still in the top 10. You're good.
Top 10 and everything. I'm trying to.
I don't
I'll get
blame
there.
V though. It's the week has been. It
was a weird week. It was a bad week.
Yeah.
But as of right now, with 2 weeks left to go after this one, you've got Vishaal, who's number 6 against the spread, number 7 with over under, and number 6 on the money line. Mason up to number 9 on the over unders, and still far and away number 1 on the money line. It's going to be very difficult for anyone to catch you on the money line.
I do it for my fans.
That's right. And all those fans should be on patreon.com/important.
Exactly.
Right
yeah,
here.
guys, we're not done. We're going to be here all the way through playoffs, doing all of our picks, all in the Discord. You can come and yell at us there for missing by the hook, or you can,
That's right.
or
Curse
you
the hook. Yeah.
or you can, yell at any of us.
Mhm.
We're all there all the time, messing around, having fun, giving our picks, BSing. So come join us, hang
it's
out,
a good
have fun.
place to be. But again, like I said, this is the season finale for the regular season. We'll be off the next 2 weeks, but we will be back in 3 weeks, start of the playoffs, and we'll be breaking down those lines and those players. So look forward to it. I will be talking to you gentlemen then. Enjoy the holidays, everybody out there, and you too as well. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we will see you come playoff time.